Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk.
Hello.
Hello. You guys don't know this, but we're back after a break, so it's like, wait, what do we do again? How does this work?
What?
Because I had COVID, and it lasted.
It did.
So we took some time off.
You were sick.
I was sick. So, yeah. So here we are.
And I'm just my usual idiot self.
No break for you, though. You had to hear us every week still because we used our spares.
Yes. Because Shannon had the brilliant idea of, we'll record a couple extras.
I'm so glad we did that. Oh,
yes.
Like, I was so relieved.
Because otherwise we would have had to do it over...
Yeah, we would have done on Zoom, and I would have sounded ridiculous. So I didn't sound like there's that whole in the Friends. If people watch Friends, there's this whole thing where Phoebe gets sick, and then because she's sick and she's all phlegmy, she sounds sexy, and so she's performing.
Yes,
and I was like, if I sang "Smelly Cat" right now, it would not be sexy. First of all, I always get laryngitis if I get anything congestive. I get laryngitis, so.
But I don't know if any rendition of Smelly Cat is sexy.
But I feel like she sings that in that one. She's like, Smelly Cat. Because she's all growly or whatever. I'd just be like, because my voice would be breaking.
It would be more of the Scooby-Doo version.
It would be the seal version, but not the singer. The animal.
The aquatic animal.
That's right. So... Yes. That's what I would have sounded like. So you're welcome that we took a break and had spares. And also I was welcome because I actually had, I was so lucky because I had a fever and all that. And I had gone ahead and I had edited it in advance and uploaded in advance through the end of because we have a paid block each month. And I had reached the limit or I would have kept going probably. But yeah, so I actually, I finally got a break is what I'm saying, a 2-week break. Yay. And it's because I was sick. But I also started a new job during that time, and I mean, I'd started the month before, but this was the first I was able to actually do the job that I was hired for. Long story, but so in the middle of 102-degree fever, I was teaching myself how to do my job because there are deadlines.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was like, I hope it's right. But yeah, what's going on with you?
Well, as you're talking, I was just realizing, I have to write a food review. And I have to write it tonight because I have to take someone to the airport. And I have to leave at like 1:30 in the morning to take her to the airport.
Oh.
So hopefully when I get back, because of course it's DIA, it's not Colorado Springs. That would be too easy. I'd be like, I'll pay for a taxi.
Right?
So hopefully if I can write it after we're done with this, I won't have to, when I get home, I'll be able to crash and sleep again is the hope, or else I'm going to be out of my mind tomorrow, which nobody will even notice the difference, I'm sure.
It'll be fine.
I thought you were going to say, it'll be fun.
No. See, for a while there, when my husband had to fly out of DIA for his, because he had international flights for work, his job would pay for a chauffeur. They had a town car that they would pay for, and the town car would take him up. And because it was actually cheaper to have a town car drive from Colorado Springs to Denver than for them to pay for his car for 2 weeks in the DIA parking lot. So
we're going out of town. I'm not telling you when.
That's right.
But we'll have we'll have thing 2 staying at the house. Anyway, I was looking around to see, because we need to go to DIA in the middle of the afternoon, which is kind of an awkward time. So
that's my preferred time to go to DIA.
Well, but I mean, for people to take you, it's usually people who are, usually it's either in the morning or at any rate, we want to do it. We're going to wide around. I was checking, and I can, if we get ourselves downtown to the Antlers Hotel, there's a shuttle. It's $105
Still cheaper than parking at DIA.
Yes, $105. That's total for the two of us. But there's another, and it's a little shuttle bus. There's another service. It's, I think, $95. And they'll pick us up at our fucking house.
Really?
And I'm like, sign me up. I'll do that one.
And that was probably like the van or whatever that does it?
Yeah.
Cool.
So I was like, and I need to nail that down. Because Thing 2 will pick us up when we get back.
Okay.
I hope.
Or she'll be like, this is my house now. I have pets and a house.
Yep. And you know how, so today I picked up Pogo. I was like, what the fuck happened here? He is so fat.
Oh, no, that's better than if you pick them up and they're suddenly very light.
Well,
believe me.
Penny has trimmed down a little bit. She's gotten a little bit lighter, in addition to licking all of the fur off of her belly. And so, I mean, Pogo's always around. He's like on the back of the couch and rearranging my hair. And, so it's not like I've been avoiding him. But today I had to pick him up and move him. And I was just like, what a chunk. It's like, what are you eating?
My daughter is very offended that I call our Athena a chunk. She is a chunk. She's so round. But she's also very muscly, and she's our master mouser. So, so it's not like she's still. It's not like she's lying around.
Oh, Pogo is a total piece of furniture.
No, Athena's so timid, and she's constantly on the move. And if somebody comes in the room, she's like, "Holy shit!" and she runs away. So, except me now. And what she'll do in the evening is she doesn't like to be held, and she doesn't want to be petted unless it's 3 a.m. and I'm trying to go to bed.
Of course.
But I've learned that she'll sneak under my chair because I have like a recliner that I always in, and she in the evening, at some point, she sneaks under there. I don't even know when, because she comes around underneath and goes, and she just lies under me. That's her. That's as companionable as she gets until 3 a.m. when I want to go to bed. So that's her company. But anyway, yes, girl child's very offended about me calling her. And she's like, it's not fat. It's extra skin and it's fur. She does have a shit ton of fur.
Well,
she's exploding fur right now because it's early summer.
And Pogo is a very fluffy cat.
Yeah.
And he is a big muscular boy, but it's like one of those, high school athletes who's all of a sudden is 40 and hasn't worked out in a long time.
There you go. I mean, he is older, so that's fair.
He is.
But so here's the thing. Here, let me describe to you, though, how much she loves food. First of all, she's begging for food all the time, but she wants soft food. She doesn't want to eat the hard food.
Of course.
And they get it once in the evening, and they get you have these tiny cans, and they each get a quarter of the can. It's just a treat. And anyway, so my son was petting her. She's lying on her side. She's stretched out.
Yeah.
Cat-like. And he's petting her, and she sees a piece of hard food. I don't know, 9 inches away from her or something. And so she continues to let him pet her and lies on her side. And I'm showing him, you can't see me.
It's
and
hilarious.
She's literally just slowly inching while still lying there and purring. And she keeps inching, making sure he's still petting her until she gets to the food and still lying there. She just goes, and she eats the piece of food that she saw. If that doesn't tell you what you need to know about Athena.
Yep. Some friends of mine had a cat, Diablo, who would lay down and put his head in the food bowl to eat. I was like, he was hungry. This was as a kitten. He was just like, yeah, I'm going to eat now, but, why expend too much energy?
Yeah. Doesn't. I like my dinner with a nap.
And that was when I had my cat Sanger, and they were kittens together. And Sanger would extend a claw and pick up one piece of food at a time. Because I don't know what we were feeding him back then, but it had a hole in the middle.
Yeah.
So she would just... So here you have the one who's laying face first in the bowl, and the other one is delicately... Yeah. So...
But Athena drinks her water by putting her paw in and licking it off her paw. I'm just like, isn't it easier? Just put your face in the water bowl there, cat? But no. She'll lick her paw. liquor pot. So I have to wash it out every day to get like
Yep.
fur out.
Yep.
Dorky cats. Since we're on cats, I tried to do yoga out back the other day.
Good
I
on
like
you.
to do yoga out back. I have this little, there's like a spot where there's the greenhouse and the porch, and there's in between, I have the most privacy I'm going to get in suburbia.
Yes.
To do my yoga. And so I'm back there doing it, and along comes Percy with a mouse hanging out of her mouth to bring over to me. And so I got up and tried to save the mouse. I don't think it worked because I smell something dead under the porch, but I tried. Because here's the thing. I pick up Percy, who is this big, muscular Abyssinian, and I'm holding her, and she's frantically trying to get out, and I'm yelling at the mouse to go. Like, stomping. Because it's, it's stunned. It was being carried in something's mouth. And it finally runs, and then out of nowhere bolts Athena. And she goes in there, so that I'm under my porch, holding one cat and trying to wrangle the other with the other arm. And I just have, it's mouse season, apparently. Here's the one. I was sitting on the toilet again, when my fever was 102, was in the height of my COVID, and I go in, and it's middle of the night, so I had just I didn't latch the door.
Well, no.
Because a cat will come and meow and scratch at it, so at night when I'm alone, I'm not latching the door. So I'm sitting there, and the door opens, and Athena drops a mouse at my feet. While I'm on the toilet going pee. And so I lift up my feet, and I yell at Athena, probably. There's probably profanity. Finish. Take care of my shit, Flush the toilet. And then I have to get up, and luckily there was a box of Band-Aids, because my daughter has a thing about Band-Aids, so my husband stocks like this box with all different sizes of Band-Aids for her.
Well, that's
and
nice.
So I take the box, flip it so that everything falls into the sink, all Band-Aids, and plonk the box over the mouse. Then I had to pound on the wall. Because my son was still awake, but he was upstairs, to get him to come down and bring me something to slide under it. Because I tried to, take my hands off the box, and the bug started moving. And I was like, I'm not catching it again. I'm not chasing this mouse all night. Because it was, in the middle of the night, and I was getting ready to go to bed. And so I was like, I just want to go to bed and be sick and not sleep. So those were my mouse adventures lately.
Wow. I have nothing to compete with that.
My cats are assholes.
All cats are assholes.
I posted about Athena dropping the mouse at my feet in my bathroom. Everybody thought that was hilarious. But then they're all like, she was just giving you a present. And I'm like, oh, I know what she was giving me.
Yeah, she can't lift up a middle finger. So.
She was really mad at me when I got rid of that mouse. Yes. Then she was throwing herself at the back door because she was going to go out and get it. I actually had to race her because the back door was partially open because they go out. And so I ditched it out front, which I know means it's probably just going to run back into our garage. But where am I supposed to go with a fever to drop off a fucking mouse?
No.
It was going out front. And she's not dumb. I just want to be clear on this. She turns around from the front door when I come in empty-handed, and she races toward the back door. She was going to go right around and try and catch it again.
Of course.
And luckily I was able to grab her on the back porch and shut the door.
Because I'm thinking in a foot race against a cat, I would
lose.
Win.
I would but luckily she paused on the back porch, and I just pounced. And then I brought her in, and boy, was she mad at me. Her ears were to the side. I was like, sorry, not sorry, jerk. She was like, I brought that for you to eat while you weren't going to the bathroom.
You looked hungry.
And you didn't eat it.
You didn't feel good, so I brought you a snack.
I would like to eat it.
You can eat that?
Yeah. Nope. It's yours. Yeah, and of course, every time I try and catch them, it's both of the kittens trying to, I'm sitting there with it in the box, and Athena's pawing at the box, too. Another reason I couldn't just leave it. It's not the first time I've had to call Gabriel down in the middle of the night to help me catch a mouse, either. It's not. I'd love to say it was.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, Lord. So now that I talked about cats and mice a lot.
Yes.
There's a lot. That's the only thing. Listen, people, I've been sick, and that's the only thing that's happened to me because I haven't left this house. It's been 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. So, why don't we start?
Okay. I was going to say, the outside world, it's still out there. Yeah, it's pretty much still that, too.
If you're thinking of starting a podcast or even just starting to research it, Buzzsprout is your go-to source for information and hosting. They have tons of videos and write-ups on everything you need to know about recording and distributing a podcast, and they even provide easy ways to get analytics on how your podcast is doing. We use Buzzsprout for our podcast hosting, and through them, we've been able to connect with tons of resources and distributors. Following a link in the show notes lets Buzzsprout know we sent you, gets you a $20 Amazon gift card if you sign up for a paid plan, and helps support our show. A win-win. Not only do they help you get started, but they also do small things to encourage you, such as awarding you badges as you hit various milestones. Join over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world.
So, I'm doing a special theme today because a friend of mine is, as we speak, as we are recording, what time is it? As we speak, she's in surgery. So, she's in surgery right now. She's having a lumpectomy. It's her second lumpectomy. So, the story behind this is she and I were at I'll just say we were at a retreat. I don't want to give too much identification away. And there was an older woman at the retreat who they were trying to figure out who was going to be in what room. And she had to be in a room that had a tub. She couldn't be in a room that had a shower. And we were like, why not? And it turns out she said she hasn't taken a shower since she saw Psycho.
Oh.
Since she saw...
Is this a bad time for me to tell you that if you do a black light in a hotel tub that you won't want to take a bath there anymore?
I don't ever want to take a bath in a hotel tub.
I did once before I saw expose on the tub is the dirtiest place in a hotel room, really.
I don't. Anyway. No, I'm well aware. So I do want to point out that Psycho came out in 1960.
Yeah.
Now, that's not saying she saw it in the theater the first weekend it was released or anything. But, so, that's still a long time to avoid showers. So I, helpful soul that I am, say to the people sitting at my dinner table, would you like me to tell you some stuff that's happened in bathtubs? And everyone at the table said no.
Thanks.
So, in honor of my perverse sense of humor, and for my friend, I'm going to give you some icky shit that's happened in bathtubs. So, the first one up takes place in Ontario, Canada, in January of 2003. So, I do have to point out, I'm going to use their names, but these are not their real names. There were 2 girls involved, and because they were underage, their names were changed in the press. So, Linda Anderson was raising her daughters, Sandra, 16, and Elizabeth, 15, by herself. And let me just say, if you've had your kids that close together, that's pressure. Having 2 kids that close
together. What
is
it? My 2 youngest siblings are Irish twins. They're like 18 months apart or something. So mine are 2.5. That's actually a good space for anybody who's curious.
I would agree.
Yeah.
That's what mine are apart. So she's raising her 2 daughters by herself. Her husband, who was their father, had abandoned them. But Linda was a hardcore alcoholic and suffered from depression. So the sisters were often neglected, and they were abused by their mother's boyfriend. They were, by all reports, sick of watching their mother drink and spend their money on alcohol. So they tried to report her. They said their mother drove drunk. They didn't have basic necessities at home. Sandra said that she reported the abuse to a priest, the abuse by her mother's boyfriend, but he wouldn't report it. He told her she needed to talk to her mother about it, so nothing ever came of that. And she tried to report her mother for child abuse, but again, nothing ever came of it. She couldn't get very far in the system. So the girls decided to kill their mother with the idea that they could collect her life insurance. One of the things they were going to do was take their friends on a European vacation with the money. So they searched the internet and decided that drowning her in the bathtub would be easy and, their word, unspectacular. So I'm guessing they thought this would be, there wouldn't be a lot of physical fighting. There wouldn't be blood.
Have they ever, even a movie, watched a movie where you have to hold somebody down while they fight you.
Oh, wait. No. Oh, no, they planned this.
Okay.
They planned it. I don't want to say they planned it well, but they planned it well. So, at lunchtime on January 18th, this is 2003, the girls began bringing their mother drinks, giving her hard liquor, and they were also giving her Tylenol with codeine to slow her reaction time.
I will say, even as an insomniac, when I had to take Tylenol with codeine as a teenager for something that happened, I slept. That was the best I'd slept in years.
So, while they're waiting for the drugs and alcohol to take effect, they were chatting online with their friends about murdering their mother. Yeah. So, one friend joked with them that they needed to wear gloves. Like, remember to wear gloves when you do it. So they did. What they did was they led their mother into the bathroom and they told her, they spun this story that they wanted to pamper her, that they wanted to take care of her. So they get her into the bathroom and she was so inebriated and drugged, she actually had trouble getting into the tub. So once they get her in, they persuaded her to roll on her stomach so they could massage her back. So that's what she did. She rolled on her stomach and Sandra pushed her head underwater and held it there until they decided she was dead. Mm-hmm. And they had looked it up and she determined that 4 minutes was how long you needed to. Jesus. And there wasn't any. So in this case, there wasn't any resistance.
Right, because she was drugged.
She was drugged and she was drunk. So after that, they went to a restaurant to celebrate with friends.
Gross.
Yep. When they returned home hours later, they called the police to report that they'd found their mother drowned in the tub. They cried when they talked to the 911 operator, who, of course, is telling them, can you try resuscitation? And they're like, it's not working. And they're sobbing. So when the police arrived on the scene, the police totally bought into this. Mm-hmm. And remember, because she was drugged and drunk, there was no bruising. It wasn't like they had to forcibly hold her under.
Yeah, so not even if she had been fighting, there might have been bruising on the back of her head or her face from being...
but no.
Yeah.
So the girls got away with it for about a year, almost exactly a year. Then there was a male acquaintance who they met at a party, and they started bragging about what they had done. So he went to the police and told the police about it. The police wired him up. They wired up him and they wired up a car and set him to talk to each sister separately. And they both quickly implicated themselves. They just could not wait to talk about it. So they were arrested on January 21st, tried and sentenced to 10 years in prison and forbidden contact with each other. The relatively mild sentence was because they were charged as minors and not, in Canada, it's called youth as adult. So they weren't charged that way, although they could have been. The judge said the children suffered a level of poverty that was not in keeping with their mother's relatively good income.
Okay.
So she had a job and was making a decent amount of money, but they were living below their income level because she was spending all the money on booze.
Okay.
So Sandra, the older one, was released to a halfway house in 2009 and Elizabeth in 2010. And if anybody is further interested, because I have a couple more coming up, if anybody is further interested in this, in 2020, Sandra sat down for an exclusive interview and talked about her childhood and what it was like.
Were they actually actively, was there neglect, or are we now considering living at below your means as abuse?
Well, it said the basics, they didn't have the basics in the household.
Okay.
So I don't know how they...
So it's kind of neglect. It's a kind of neglect.
It is a kind of neglect. I don't believe that...
I don't think that's worth killing somebody.
No,
okay.
I think they had a lot of options, and that was the one they chose because they wanted the insurance money. Now, the older daughter does say now that she can understand, as a mother herself, the kind of pressure that her mother was under. Oh, she totally has a different story now. And apparently there was also a younger brother. Because she said she can now understand what it was like to try to... What it must have been like for a mother to try to support 3 children as a single mother. That was like a tag at the end of an article. And I'm like, what the fuck? There was a brother? Where was he during all of this? No mention of him, except until the end of this interview. Not what happened to him, not nothing. So I'm assuming he wasn't home when this happened?
Maybe, yeah. Was he older and out?
Younger,
yeah.
I think they got him out of the house, sent him to a friend's house. And so, yeah, totally. So that was what happened. And they were called, did I write it down? I probably did not. They were called the Bathtub Girls, or the Bathtub Sisters. It was hugely, apparently, in the media at the time. The next one, we're going to jump back to 1996 in Arlington, Texas. So on September 17th, the body of 26-year-old Christine View was found face down in a half-filled bathtub in her apartment, and her hands, ankles, and neck had been wrapped in duct tape. Her autopsy showed that she had been raped, strangled, and then drowned. And a very clear fingerprint and a DNA sample was collected at the scene, but no match was found. 3 months later, on December 24th, in the same apartment complex, the body of 20-year-old Wendy Prescott was found face down in her bathtub. Her neck, hands, and ankles were all bound with duct tape. Once again, police found a fingerprint and a semen sample, but there was no match. And they could figure out pretty quickly, they could match it. Yes, this is the same person who did this 3 months ago, but nothing else was coming up. So in 2000, yes, which was I was like, how many years was that? 4 years later, the police resubmitted the DNA evidence to the FBI, and this time a match was found. 23-year-old Dale Devon Shanette. After his arrest, he was connected to sexual assaults of 4 other women in their apartments in the Dallas-Fort Worth area between September of 98 and October of 99. So he was convicted of Prescott's murder and sentenced to death. He was charged in Wu's murder, but not tried because he had already been sentenced to death. So he was executed in February of 2009. So he spent a few years on death row.
She was the only one, though, that got drowned. That wasn't like a...
Yeah, the other one, those 2 were both found in the bathtub.
Okay.
But the other 4 women he had attacked were not. Well, it didn't
But they were first, probably?
They were first. He escalated.
Okay.
He escalated. So here's the really weird one. Like, the first 2 weren't weird enough. Boone, North Carolina, is a small town in the Blue Ridge Mountains toward the northwest corner of North Carolina. I'm gesturing. You can't see it. I'm gesturing northwest corner. So there was a snowstorm in February in 1972, and a family was murdered. This was 51-year-old Bryce Durham, his wife, 46-year-old Virginia Durham, and their 19-year-old son, Bobby Joe, who was I'd seen the pictures, he was a strapping young man. They were found in their Boone home with their heads draped into a bathtub full of water. Virginia had been strangled to death, while the 2 men had been strangled and then drowned. The family had moved to Boone in 1969, so just 3 years earlier, when Bryce bought the local Buick dealership. Consensus around town was that this was a friendly family, but they hadn't really put down roots yet. They hadn't been there long enough that they were deeply connected. They weren't super outgoing. They weren't standoffish by any means. The son was well liked. He had a reputation as a real stand-up guy in high school. Nobody, not their friends, family, or law enforcement, believed there were any ties to any kind of shady activity or illegal activity or drug-related bullshit.
You know.
The night of the murder, their son-in-law, Troy Hall, said he got a muffled phone call from Virginia where she stated that her husband and son were being held by a number of African-American males on a different floor of the house. Okay, I'm just going to, spoiler alert, that's complete and total bullshit.
As it usually is when somebody makes a point of putting that in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Troy thought who is married to their daughter. He thought the call was a prank, but he and his wife, Ginny, he's like, I think it's a prank. And Ginny is like, can we please go check? So because of the snowstorm, they can't get their car started. So he gets a neighbor who's some kind of private investigator to drive them over to the Durham household to check. And it's an ice storm. They couldn't even get up the driveway. They had to park at the bottom of the hill, and the two men walked up. That's when they discovered the bodies, immediately called the police. So the investigators get there. The TV is still on. There was a phone off the hook, the one they think she called from. Phone is off the hook, lying on the floor. There was soft drinks and snacks on the table. So it appeared that the family was watching TV together. And when something happened. Now, someone did report seeing a green and white GMC Jimmy leaving the property at about 10:30 p.m., which was very shortly before Troy Hall arrived. Shortly after midnight, the state troopers found that vehicle, the engine still running, the windshield wipers still going, abandoned, about 2 hours away. There were many valuables in the house, including a bank deposit, that were just left there. They weren't touched. But they did find some of their silverware in the car. Which just is like, what the fuck? There's cash, and you ignore the cash and take their silverware?
Which, unless it's actual silverware, is just $10 of...
It's just
junk metal.
Yeah. So it turns out the reason that they had this car at their house, he had brought his family home from the dealership in that car because of the storm.
Okay.
So the next day, and it's really interesting because I could not find out who it was. 4 white males were arrested and then later released. After that, the trail went cold. I mean, for decades, there were no leads, despite there was a cash reward. Somebody new would become the DA and would take it. Interest would be renewed. They could not find any leads. They investigated his dealings at the car dealership. There were leads, or there were theories about a car theft ring. That didn't pan out. There was also a theory about Green Beret involvement because there was some kind of exercise near there, some kind of military exercise. That went nowhere. Okay. So fast forward to this year, 2022, 50 years after the crime. The lead actually developed in 2019 because a man named Shane Burt went to the White County, Georgia Sheriff's Office. Can we just stop and talk about the fact that Georgia has a white county? Anyway, he was volunteering to help with research for a book on notorious crimes in the state. His father was Billy Sunday Burt, a member of the Dixie Mafia. And if you ever want a treat, go to Wikipedia and look up the Dixie Mafia, because this is not a highly developed organization by any means. But it's a bunch of, I just want to say it's a bunch of crackers committing crimes. It's all for money and power. There's no family loyalty.
That's exactly what you'd think of when you hear of the Dixie Mafia. It's a bunch of crackers committing crimes.
So, the dad, Billy Sunday Burt, Shane remembered visiting his father in prison and his father telling a story about killing 3 people in the North Carolina mountains during a snowstorm and how they almost got caught. So the White County Sheriff's Department reached out to the Watauga County Sheriff's Department. That's the county where Boone, North Carolina is, with the information. And during the investigation, they were able to link Billy Sunday Burt with the 3 other perpetrators, who were Bobby Jean Gaddis, Charles David Reed, and Billy Wayne Davis. Davis, at 81, is the only one still alive and is incarcerated in Georgia. Davis did provide more details. He said it was a hired hit, but he didn't know who ordered it, which is just bizarre. He claims he was the getaway driver and never entered the house, which I'm like, who the fuck's going to contradict him? The other 3 are dead.
Right.
And that's what you would say. Yeah. The police were able to corroborate the story with 2 other sources. And apparently Billy Burt did have another son who also said, yes, I heard Dad tell those stories. Dad bragged about those stories. and bragged about being part of the Dixie Mafia. Also, the same 4 men were involved in a very similar crime in Georgia later that same year. Okay. Same MO, same, family, taking care of them the same way. So these are just a few of the fucked up things that can happen in a bathtub.
So many. There's so many.
So many.
That happen in bathtubs.
Yes. And I will...
showers.
I will say, I do want to give my sources, of course. Wikipedia. Wikipedia is always where you start. A bathtub girl explains why she took her mother's life. Global News. Murderpedia. There were so many news articles about the investigation on the Durham family slaying, and they were all almost identical. It's like the same press release. They'd have a little bit different opening and a little bit different at the end, but the body of every single article was exactly the same. So, triple murder solved 50 years after North Carolina family found slain in bathtub. Was on NBC News. So that one's for Amy.
There you go, Amy. Thinking of you. Do you enjoy going to the grocery store? If so, this message is not for you. But if you're like me and procrastinate going to the store, Instacart is a fantastic option to ensure you no longer have to. Save yourself a trip and go through Instacart, where you can get a delivery through a personal shopper in as little as 1 hour. My experiences have been great so far, with my personal shopper texting me before substituting another product, letting me know when they were on their way to my house, and letting me know it had been delivered, all via text. If you click on our affiliate link in the show notes or on our website, you get free delivery on your first order over $35, and you help out our show at the same time. It's the perfect time to give it a try. I'm just going to say, because I don't know how much sound's going to filter over, and there's no way for me to edit it all out. My son has friends over, and they're in the back. And so they have walked through here so much the last few minutes and gotten ice and water, and I'm just sorry. But it's more important that he have actual friends over.
Yes.
After our house was the no-go zone for 3 weeks following school letting out. So, all right. And if I don't hear it, I'll edit that part out. All right. So I'm doing the Smiley Face Murders theory. This is a theory.
The Smiley Face Murder theory.
Yep.
Could we call it a theorem?
I don't know. This is not to be confused with the Happy Face murder. That was a serial killer that I already covered. Okay, so this is a little wonky, and that's why I like it, because who knows?
Who doesn't love some good wonk?
I love some wonk. In 2008, 2 retired police detectives named Frank Gannon and Anthony Duarte announced to the public that they felt a group of killers was working in the northern and midwestern parts of the U.S., specifically along the I-94 corridor, to kill off men. They said it had started sometime around 1997 and was ongoing. It's thought that possibly hundreds of cases can be tied to the group. After they went public, they were joined by Michael Donovan, another detective, and Dr. Lee Gilbertson, a professor of criminal justice, who originally said this is crazy conspiracy, and then they presented him the evidence, and now he's a full-blown member of the Smiley Face Murders team. For the most part, though, the FBI and detectives local to the cases think it's a ridiculous conspiracy theory. In general, the men were white, athletic, and college-aged. They are frequently college students, not just college-age, and are getting good grades, are well-liked. They were found in bodies of water after nights out at bars in winter months. Some died in different states on the same night, which is why it was thought to be multiple killers. That's why they think this is basically, they've described it as a cabal of serial killers. All were originally determined by local police to have been accidental drowning deaths. Because some of the bodies were found a significant time period later, but showed minimal deterioration for the circumstances, the detectives feel the men are being drugged and kept for a period of time, then disposed of in the water after death. For example, and I'll go more into each of these people later, but Dakota James had been missing for 40 days when his body was found in the Ohio River, but had minimal deterioration. When Tommy Booth was found in a creek in Pennsylvania, his body was in full rigor mortis, but he'd been missing for 2 weeks, and rigor mortis dissipates within 24 to 36 hours of death, typically. Aside from the issues with post-mortem physical conditions, there's also the fact that Todd Geib was found 3 weeks after he went missing with his upper body sticking out of the water in a lake, like he was sitting there, but the lake had already been thoroughly searched and dredged. Chris Jenkins, a 21-year-old, was found floating in the Mississippi River on his back with his arms crossed neatly on his chest. Another example of staging involves Tommy Booth again, who had sticks arranged around him, several, and they were stuck into the ground to hold his body in place against the water. Also interesting is the fact that graffiti of smiley faces has been found near many of the locations where it's thought the bodies were originally dumped. So they said in at least a dozen cases.
Wow.
The smiley faces are not uniform, so it's not the same one each time. One of them has double ears, and one of them is pink, and one of them is yellow. So GHB has been found in at least 30 of the victims, but here's the thing about that. The problem is that the standard toxicology report done in deaths like these does not test for GHB, so the drug has mostly only been found in victims whose families requested or authorized additional testing or sent tissue samples to the Smiley Face Killers team. So that's why they don't know if others would have had GHB in them or not. At least some of the victims were described as being more intoxicated than made sense for the amount they'd been drinking and like their size, their mass. On the flip side of this, GHB is used recreationally by some, which we only found out a few weeks ago, which some also explain, that could also explain how somebody had an accident and fell into a body of water, right?
Yes.
So it can go either way, but that's a lot of GHB. I don't think,
yeah.
So as a teenager, I did some drugs. I was involved in a kind of drug culture, right?
Shocked.
And not, shocking, I say. So were you. I never knew until recently, as a grown-ass adult, that GHB was recreationally used.
I actually didn't know it until 2 seconds ago when you said it.
Okay, so
That's the date rape.
it is.
Date.
Rohypnol or whatever
Yes.
that gets called. So to me, I just don't think it can be that widely used.
What do I want to ask? How or why it's recreationally used?
I mean, it makes you feel the same sort of thing as alcohol, where if you take a recreational amount rather than a knock them out and rape them amount, that you feel light and
euphoric,
out of
perhaps?
control.
Okay.
And yes. There have also been several victims with insect activity that indicated they'd been kept somewhere on dry land before being dumped into the water. And lividity and bloating have often not matched up with being in the water for the brief period of time. It said that, for example, one of the ones found floating face up, which, by the way, is rare to find a body floating face up, that he had lividity on the top of his body as if he had been lying on his face on dry land. So, So there's just a lot of little discrepancies, which is what they've been picking up on. In profiling the victims, they were typically popular and attractive. Because of this, Gannon and Duarte feel the killers are a group of men who are unpopular and unattractive and have found each other online. They're taking out men they're jealous of. All of the men were considered promising. They had big things happening. Several of them are graduate students. So they feel that they're actually meeting up on the dark web and coordinating among themselves, and that it could be almost like a gang initiation for these is, okay, you have to kill this person. And that's why they also think that some of them have the smiley faces, is that that's their sign that they did this or whatever. Oxygen made a documentary on the subject called Smiley Face Killers, The Hunt for Justice, where they focused on 6 specific cases. And I'm going to go through those men now kind of individually. That's Dakota James, Tommy Booth, Lucas Homan, William Hurley, Todd Geib, and Brian Weltzine. Brian Weltzine was found March 17th, 2000 on the shore of Lake Michigan in Indiana. So he was actually found in Gary, Indiana, which is funny because I hear about that being crime associated so often. It's so high crime. The 21-year-old finance student and soccer player had been missing for 77 days from Chicago, where he'd been out partying to celebrate Y2K. He wasn't a big drinker, and his friend said he'd only had 3 or 4 drinks, and I'm assuming beers in that case. If you're saying he drank lightly, it's beers, right?
Yeah.
But had appeared to be heavily intoxicated. He was one of the ones where they're like, yeah, he was super messed up and vomiting, but he hadn't drunk enough to be that messed up. So one of his friends drove him back to the hotel because they weren't at home. They were in Chicago celebrating Y2K, and they were staying at a hotel. But Brian was sick, and so he stepped out of the car to vomit, and then the friend went to finish parking the car or something like that. But it said he didn't come home until 4 a.m. to the hotel. And several witnesses also saw Brian out there vomiting. But no one saw him walk away or get snatched. They just saw a dude vomiting out there in the parking lot, and they were like, okay.
And you tend to look away. I do.
Yeah.
I don't want to watch that.
So when he got to the hotel room, when everybody else arrived back there at 4 a.m., he wasn't there. And so this friend who had dropped him off went and looked for him outside and didn't find him anywhere. And he looked for a while. The lake was about a 5-minute walk away, so it was assumed he'd walked there and drunkenly fallen in, though his blood alcohol level was only 0.08%. Todd Geib was found July 2nd, 2005 in Odvahal Lake in Michigan, his head and shoulders sticking out above the water. The 22-year-old had been missing since June 12th and had last been seen at a bonfire in an orchard with friends. He was actually talking to a friend while walking home on the cell phone, and the last thing he said was that he was in a field, and then the call dropped. Though he'd been missing 22 days, he was hardly decomposed, with it being on par more with about 2 to 3 days, they said, of decomp. They found
this was in June?
July.
Okay, so warm weather. It's not like
it's not midwinter. So 2 or 3 days of decomp over 22 days. They found antidepressants in his system, but he was not prescribed any, and nobody was aware of him having issues with depression or recreationally, if anybody does that, taking antidepressants. There were 2 smiley faces associated with him. One painted on a tree near where the body was found, and a smiley face sticker was actually placed on his grave. Lucas Homan was found October 2nd, 2006, near the Mississippi River in Wisconsin. On September 29th, he'd been walking home at about 10 p.m. from Oktoberfest with a friend when they got separated. The friend ended up in the ER with a head injury and had no memory of the evening or how they'd gotten separated. Lucas had injuries on his forehead, with the smiley face investigators they think might have been a shoe print from him being held down.
Okay.
As well as on his hands and arms. A smiley face was found near where the 21-year-old's body was found. When canines were searching, one hit on an SUV, which turned out to belong to a band member whose band had been performing at the bar when Lucas disappeared, but he was not considered a suspect. And they said the canine hit was inconclusive. So, whatever that means. Tommy Booth was found February 3rd, 2008 in Ridley Creek in Pennsylvania. The 24-year-old had been missing since January 19th, and the creek ran behind the bar in which he'd last been seen. It had been searched. And it's a creek.
Yeah.
I get I'm from Colorado and a creek here is a trickle.
Right.
But how big does a creek get anywhere that it would be a stream?
What time of year was that?
So he's February.
Yeah.
So it'd even be frozen, a creek. Right?
Largely,
in Pennsylvania? Think. That's far north. So the area had been searched extensively after he disappeared. They found a smiley face under the deck of the bar on a wall. He had no signs of physical trauma and was in full rigor mortis when found. Interestingly, there was video footage of him arriving at the bar, but none of him leaving. And again, he's the one who had sticks around him. Like, as if to keep the body there.
Okay.
William Hurley was found October 14th, 2009 in the Charles River in Massachusetts. He was 24 years old, a veteran of the Navy, and had disappeared on the 8th after last being seen at a Bruins game in Boston. He had gone to the game with 2 friends, but called his girlfriend partway through the game and told her he wanted to leave because he was a groundskeeper and he had worked that day. And he called and he was like, I'm out. I'm done. And so he asked her to come get him because he'd come with the friends. When she showed up, he wasn't there, so she called him and asked where he was. And someone nearby answered him and gave the address, a man's voice, and William said his phone was about to die. So she tried to find him for at least an hour, driving around the stadium, and she never found him. When they did find him, he had suffered blunt force trauma to his head, face, and leg, and GHB was found in his system. His cell phone was also smashed nearby. A smiley face was found near the river. So my thing about him... What annoyed me, of course, when there's something like this, there's not a lot of information on each case. I'm like, did the girlfriend think he sounded drunk? Was he slurring? Or did he sound... Because from what they describe, he sounded perfectly reasonable and not drunk. And why, when you're waiting for your girlfriend, do you then walk away from the stadium through downtown and go to the
that doesn't
river?
Make any
they
sense.
said the river was like across from it. But I don't know. Maybe he went to walk. But you tell your girlfriend to come pick you up.
You're where she can pick you up.
Yeah, so... Dakota James was found March 6, 2017. He's one of the more recent ones in the Ohio River in Pennsylvania, but he'd been missing since January 25th. He was last seen at about 11:30 p.m. walking home from a bar. A camera caught him turning into an alley downtown, and he wasn't caught on any cameras or seen after that. The 23-year-old Duquesne University graduate student, was found near an underpass on which there was a smiley face painted. Police thought he'd fallen into the river while crossing a bridge. His body was 10 miles from where they figured he would have fallen in, and he would have had to go through a dam. Oddly, he had very little physical damage for someone whose body had supposedly drifted that distance and through a dam. In addition, he had only had decomp that made sense for about 3 days worth. And I know Pennsylvania is far north. It's early March, so who knows what the weather's like. I don't know how
it
cold.
It would be well, it could be very cold, but not likely to be super cold.
So probably not weather like mid-winter hard freeze that you wouldn't decompose as much.
Right.
So it's odd to be in the water and have 3 days of decomp.
Yeah.
For something it was January 25th to March 6th. So he did disappear in the winter, though. So, I don't know. Though those are the cases that have drawn the most recent attention due to whatever reasons, the first person to have caught the eyes of Gannon and Duarte was Patrick McNeil, who died in 1997 in New York. His parents felt they were NYPD. His parents felt there were too many odd details for his death to have been accidental. McNeil had been at the Dapper Dog, a bar, but got so drunk he was vomiting. He contacted a friend to pick him up, but the friend never showed, so he walked toward the subway station. A witness saw him walking that way and also saw a van following him. It had been double parked outside the bar before he started walking, and it was multiple witnesses actually saw it and related, having seen him walk down the street, and this van, when he would stop to throw up or whatever, the van would stop too.
Oh.
So that's interesting. It took a month for his body to show up in the East River, though the ME declared it an undetermined drowning, which is what they were all pretty much called, undetermined drowning. Some of them were accidental drowning, some were undetermined. And Gannon was the detective on the case before he retired, and he said there were signs he had been bound and beaten, that there were marks around his wrists and ankles and other injuries, and that he hadn't died via drowning, and there were ligature marks around his neck. Housefly larvae were found in his groin area, but they have to be laid indoors in a warm area. And again, this was New York, and did I put the month? It was a winter month. So, okay, February. It was February in New York. And these are houseflies, and they don't go out in the cold. It would kill them.
No.
He also did not have skin slippage on the bottom of his feet, which would have occurred if he'd been in the water for longer than a day. Patrick was not the only one of the victims who had a suspicious vehicle following him. There have been many reports of vans or SUVs seen behaving oddly near men who later disappeared. In fact, Dakota James, who I mentioned before, had an incident on December 15th, 2016, so about 3 months before his final disappearance and death. He'd gotten drunk and called a friend of his named Shelley to ask her to pick him up, and when she got there, he was walking confusedly toward an SUV that was idling facing the wrong way in the street. And she pulled up and got him into her car that night. And then he went missing in March. In 2020, the death of Chris Jenkins, originally considered an accidental drowning, was reclassified as a homicide after an inmate indicated foul play. And he was the one found floating on his back with his hands crossed across his chest. So kind of a duh there.
Yeah.
Those who don't believe these deaths are purposeful point to the fact that there are no clear links between the deceased. The Smileys are vastly different and don't always occur. The Smileys aren't necessarily right where the crimes occur and aren't an uncommon form of graffiti. And so pretty common for people to graffiti smiley faces. And it's not uncommon for drunk people to fall into bodies of water. They don't explain away the oddities that have occurred, but seem to wave them off as coincidental. There are law enforcement officers and family members of the deceased who question why the Smiley Face Killers team hasn't ever interviewed them. One is a sheriff's deputy. He thinks his son's death is suspicious, but his attempts to contact the team and offer to talk to them about it have gone unanswered.
That's weird.
Yep. The FBI actually released a statement in 2008 after the Smiley Face Killers team went public, saying the Smiley Face Killers ring is not a thing and that most of the deaths simply boil down to drunken accidents near bodies of water. In 2010, the Center for Homicide Research released an entire report attempting to debunk the possibility of a ring of killers. Rolling Stone magazine pointed out the following stats from the CDC that might explain these deaths. Accidental death is the number one cause of death for males under age 44, and men between 18 and 34 years old are more likely to binge drink. Medium pointed out that there are about 4,000 drowning deaths per year in the U.S. A black columnist for OnMilwaukee.com named Eugene Kane wrote an article asking how it is that it's only white males dying this way if it's so standard for men this age. I didn't even think about that until I read this piece from him, and I was like, yeah, you're right. It should be like,
Yeah.
there should be a mix. Although I will say the kind of the northern climes where these people have been happening, where this has been happening, I don't know how racially diverse each of these areas are. I mean, like, isn't Michigan? I don't know. It depends on where in Michigan. Are you,
I would
you know,
assume.
like, so I don't know. A lot of them have been big college towns, which to me would say more diversity, but
they're generally can be more diverse than the surrounding area.
yeah. And that is the thing, that a lot of them are big college towns that it keeps happening in. But then again, there's going to be more men of that age out partying in a college town, right? So it just circle. I don't.
But there's the discrepancy in the rates of decomposition.
That's the thing. I think that, well, I'll go into that in a minute. But yes, there absolutely are in some of them.
Yes.
So the Smiley Face Killers team says the rate of the homicides is picking up. They think this is because the killers have been emboldened by police dismissing the possibility of a cabal of serial killers. In addition, the men killed have been increasingly comprised of openly gay men in the more recent years. The team keeps a database compiling victims who meet their victim profile and specific aspects of death that match the criteria they've developed. The database currently has 335 possible victims on it.
Wow.
So these are cases, drowning deaths, where they have seen discrepancies. Their hope is primarily to have the cases reclassified as murders, as they don't believe they're accidental, at the very least. The desire to prove there's a chain of serial killers working together is secondary to that. So, is this a case of a serial killer gang or simply an urban legend? My thing is, I feel at least some of them should be reclassified as murders, whether it's a serial killer or not.
Right.
If there's something weird about it, it shouldn't be determined to be accidental. Like, it just doesn't make sense. If a man was followed by a van before he died, and so Patrick McNeil, that first one in 97 in New York, he was another one that they were like, I don't know that he was drinking enough to be as intoxicated and vomiting as he was. And now he was interesting because I found this whole about him, right? Like
rabbit hole.
Yeah. And there were some people who didn't like him. He was considered a ladies' man. And so it's like, again, that doesn't point to cabal to me necessarily, but it does point to he was probably murdered. And there were other students who had issues with him who were at the bar that night. It was like a frat bar. And they would, in order to get more students there and keep their business up, they would bring in, what do they call it? A guest bartender on like 1 week in a month or something. And it would be a student from the nearby school who was popular. Okay. So they'd be a draw. They also got in a lot of trouble for not cutting people off when they were over intoxicated, not necessarily following the laws. They'd been fined. There was a bunch of stuff about this bar. But yeah, there was even one of his like housemates and whatever. I don't know if he lived in a frat or a dorm or what, had an issue with him. So it very much could have been a murder. And his father was some big Republican figure. He actually made a lot of waves about his son's death and like put a lot of pressure on the cops that they needed to solve this. And he was powerful enough that then it was like that whole thing you see in a movie, all cliched, right? The mayor's like, you have to solve this because he's one of our biggest or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, whatever it was. But so he had put a lot of pressure, and he still maintains that his son was murdered and it wasn't accidental, but he has never been reclassified. He's still just accidental death. And again, his body was found much later in the river, and it wasn't far. Like, it hadn't gone far. So
yeah, that just doesn't...
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. And if they're being held before they're being killed, where are they being held and why?
Right.
Or if they're
some of them were found within a week, but some of them it's like 2 months is like the big one, right?
Yeah, and if they... Otherwise, I'm thinking... If you kill them immediately, you have to store them somewhere.
Yeah.
You would have to store them in a freezer, I would think.
Well, and here's another thing that bothered me about researching this. Because the information isn't out there, they haven't put... there's a book. I didn't read the whole book because it's like more like a textbook sort of situation, like a study. And I'm like, okay, was there water... on their lungs? Like, was there evidence they drowned, or was there evidence they hadn't drowned? And I know that's not perfect. And I'm sure if you float in the water for a while, you can get water in your lungs, right? Even if you're dead, if there's, I don't know, if things have eaten into your body.
But I think there's a difference between you're dead and water has seeped into your lungs and you aspirating water.
But then that means that each of these MAs have declared they died drowning. Even if it's undetermined drowning, that's still drowning. Doesn't that mean they saw evidence of drowning? You see, I'm saying, like, I just don't have all the information with this, but I thought it was still interesting enough to talk about. But it's like, we can't form an opinion if we don't have all that information.
Yeah.
But even, like, the one who they felt that footprint on his head because he was in a creek, was to hold him down so that he drowned.
Right.
And so that makes sense. It's kind of like what we were talking about with the bathtub thing.
Yes.
That would make sense that there would be that bruising because he was a man. He would have fought. These were 20-something men. They're virile. They're strong. They were mostly athletic.
Yes. And that was one of the points with the family who was found in the bathtub was they couldn't imagine how they figured it couldn't have been a single person because the man was in his early 50s and not like out of shape. But the teenager was a strapping young man.
Yeah. And the thing is, that's kind of what I was saying before. One of the things that triggers your brain to fight the hardest is not being able to breathe. Mm-hmm. Right? Drowning, ligatures around the neck, whatever. People fight during that because your body instinctively fights when you can't breathe. That's the biggest... I mean, that was like the biggest hump for my dad to overcome with the ALS in a BiPAP is that when you feel like you're suffocating all the time when his lungs started to go, it's a horrifying thing and you fight, you know? So it would kind of make more sense. So, I mean, the man would have to be, whoever attacked them would have to be stronger than them. But that's a lot of people to be so drunk in the same category and to not be able to get themselves out of water. The creek one really kills me. I get you can drown an inch in a bathtub, right?
Right.
But there has to be something more wrong with you. And yes, that means drunk, right?
We're thinking creek and we're thinking it can't be that deep.
Yeah.
And this was February
and my thing
March.
is, he was found right behind the bar and I don't remember, but it was like 2 weeks later or whatever. How do you not find a body in a creek?
For 2 weeks.
Directly behind the bar where he disappeared. They searched that.
Yeah.
And he wasn't there.
It doesn't make any sense.
So that's why this is so intriguing. Like, whether there is a Kabbalist here, I feel like that's a whole different...
It could be several interesting cases that are similar.
And as somebody pointed out, maybe there was a copycat. Once the Smiley Face Killer team came out and said this, people might have started copycatting it. But they didn't come out till 2008, and they'd been tracking it since 97. So that's like the no copycat before that, you know?
Right.
So anyway, yeah, I find it intriguing. I don't think for a second all of these were accidental. I'll just say that. Whether I believe in a cabal or anything else like that,
they can't all be accidental.
But there's no way. And not when there's... the thing is, a lot of them showed no real physical injuries. And that's why they're like drowning. That's the reason they kept giving for it being drowning. And I'm like, but again, I need to know if they showed evidence of it being drowning. If there's water in the lungs, I need to know that. But anyway, I'm going to do my sources. 5 chilling details that will make you believe in the Smiley Face killings by Ali Vanderhayden on Oxygen. And then several other, I got maybe a sentence or something from a couple other Oxygen articles from that same person. Are the Smiley Face Killers real by Callie White Van Bale for A&E? The Untold Conspiracy of the Smiley Face Murders by Jeff Summers for Grunge. Why 3 investigators blame a rash of drowning deaths on a gang of killers by Niall Capello for Rolling Stone. And Medium and Thought Catalog. So those were my sources. But yeah, it's
it's just crazy. Too weird. Either that or there's some really bizarre factor in the decomp. Mm-hmm. But what would it be? I mean, no one has come forward and said, well, you know, it could be that.
That's right. I was like, that's what I was looking for, too. Is they kept looking for, okay, is there somebody who's come out and said, no, it's totally normal in January in New York for somebody to not decompose. But July?
That's the thing. July. I was just going to say, you had some February, March, and I'm like, okay, the ground could be softening up, maybe. But
And there was another report, and it said that they had looked at these numbers and then looked at, for example, the South, and there was no equivalent set of deaths that were like this in the South where it would have been warm, because they were like, it's cold as fuck. Nobody's walking to the water in January in New York.
No.
They're staying away from it because it's cold. And they're like, so in the South, they would expect to see greater numbers than of, say, males binge drinking and falling into water when it's nicer weather. And they did not find that equivalent. And so that I found interesting. Like in the North, they're going to be walking to water more when they're drunk than in the South, where there's probably more water in some areas.
I would think
and it's nicer weather. So it's little things like that I'm like, yeah, that's weird.
It just doesn't add up.
And again, it being disproportionate in terms of race. Like, why is it just white? Is it just white males that are so dumb that they binge drink and fall in water? Like, that was weird.
There's a case you could make for that.
But yeah, it's like, and the thing is, like, some of the articles said all white, and then some of the articles said mostly white. I didn't find any examples of somebody who was not white, but clearly if there's 335, I don't have all the names. You know, like, I don't know. So yeah, that was weird.
That's just totally weird. I don't get it. I'm like, it's actually starting to hurt my brain.
Right? And I mean, I could have gone this is one of those rabbit holes that I could have gone way deeper into. And I wanted to point out some of the cases that were considered, that had oddities about them. And then that first case. And other than that, yeah. I did read something that said that the Smiley Face Killer team seems to have kind of withdrawn recently and gone on to other crimes. And it's like, is it because they never got anywhere? Did they lose interest? I don't know.
Yeah. Wow. It's really interesting. Now I'm like, I want to go home and start reading about this.
Right?
Because I don't have enough obsessions.
And it was, the thing that led me to in the first place was one of them. I don't remember which one. And it was just one of those, because I follow a couple pages that does random it'll just do one little picture and a quick couple sentences about this weird crime that happened.
Oh, yeah.
And so then I was like, oh, interesting. And so I looked it up and I hit this whole thing.
I get sucked into those all the time.
Yeah. They're great.
And sometimes you look, and then you go and you research it, and now that is a rabbit hole, because you'll get an article that has like 6 or 7 of them, and out of 7, 6 of them are complete and total bullshit.
Yeah.
But you have to keep going till you find the one where you go, aha, there is something going on here.
Yeah.
Or something went on here, or something is rotten in Denmark.
Wait, there is something here. Yeah. So, well, we have successfully pulled off our first podcast in a couple weeks, so I guess we remembered how to do it.
Yep. And we are wrapping up season 3.
This is the end. This is the end of season 3. Don't worry, we're not taking a break this time. It'll just go straight into season 4 next week.
I feel like we should have had cake or something.
We're almost to our 100th episode. We should definitely have cake for that.
Yes.
Because this is 80 something.
Oh, yes. I will procure cake for episode 100.
Yeah.
And then we'll eat it while we're talking and describe it to you.
Oh, jeez. We'll make loud mouth noises. Because that's everybody's favorite. No! I work hard to try and edit out as many mouth noises as I can, just so you guys all know.
And you were never so aware of the strange noises you make as when you're podcasting, and you try to cut out any verbal tics.
Yes.
Any ums.
And then when you're editing and you hear it, it gets like, it's so annoying because you're so tuned to it when you're trying to edit it out. And some of them I can't edit out because it happens while the other person's talking or something like that. But I do my best, you guys. So sorry for the ones that slip through. I edit out as many ums as I can too.
And so?
From during the actual story, I usually don't hard edit us when we're just chatting. But because, we're humans. And I feel it's more human just to leave us with our verbal tics.
Or so we claim.
My alien overlords might disagree.
That's a good note to end.
That's right.
Season 3 on.
Thanks, guys. Don't remember, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com.
Yes.
/2M's and then mayhem. MM mayhem. And any little bit helps. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, and we'll talk to you next week.
And thanks for listening to us for another season.
Yay!
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.